Joining me now is Chris Martenson. He's going to be one of the keynote speakers at our National Worldview Weekend Conference coming up here in the Mid-South outside of Memphis in Collierville, Tennessee, October 3rd and 4th. We only have seating for 350 people, so you might want to go ahead and get registered. There's also the Thursday night banquet. We're going to have a keynote speaker there as well. Hadia will be our keynote speaker. You'll find the information about the Thursday night banquet with our foundation and the Friday night, Saturday conference, all of it at worldviewstore.com. Don't delay, folks, while there is seating available. Only 350 seats for the conference available. So again, you might want to get registered. Worldviewstore.com. He joins us. He'll be one of the keynote speakers, and he joins us now. Chris, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
It's my pleasure. So good to be here. What shall we talk about today?
Oh, what is it there to talk about? I want to talk a little bit about 9/11 because we've been talking about that a lot with people like Kurt Weldon and Richard Gage. That Ron Johnson wants to hold hearings on Building 7. I know you've done a lot of research on that. Let's talk about that real quick. But first, you're an economics guy. That's also big economics guy. Let's talk about gold, silver, gold prices, tariffs, inflation. Some of the in the media are saying all the shelves are going to be bare in a month. Okay, so let's break it down. All the political back and forth. You know, people are going to say a lot of things that aren't true for political points. You're a financial guy. That's how I got to know you. And of course, you're a Peak Prosperity website, right? So tell me from an economic standpoint, where are we at? What's going on with these tariffs and what you see coming? What trends?
Well, Brannon, this is almost impossible to over-communicate, but this is as big a moment as 1929, 1944, 1971. I know you know what those dates are, but this was the country coming under a Federal Reserve Standard in 1913. Mm-hmm. It was coming under what was called the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944 that changed the whole world landscape. And then we reneged on our contract, 1971, broke the gold window. Nixon did that, but it wasn't really him. It was the bankers had to have that happen. This is as big as that, right? I think Scott Bessent and Trump can do math, just like you can, just like I can. And they looked at the national balance sheet and said, wow, this is broken. And we have to do something. And so this is no less ambitious what's happening right now than a complete, hopefully, pain-free reset of the world economic and monetary order. I think that's what's going on. And this is a huge time to be alive. New risks, new opportunities. But I do think, Brennan, we're going to have to hold open the idea that gold is just singing a tale. What we saw in the bond markets a couple of weeks ago is beginning salvos of what's going to probably be a very large readjustment in the value of the dollar on the international stage.
So you think that gold is telling us in advance what's coming?
Yes.
Which
absolutely.
Gold today is around $3,322, somewhere around there. Silver's around $33. So do you see $4,000 gold by the time the year's over?
No. I see that by the time this is over, Brendan, we're going to add either 1 or 2 zeros to the end of gold.
What? By when? In what time frame?
Depends how fast. You know what they said about it was asked, how did you go broke? And he said slowly and then all at once. Yeah. So this is picking up steam right now. If you look at gold on a 20-year time frame, it's made a big cup and then the handle it's going up very sharply right now. And we're seeing China, obviously Asia in particular, more generally, is just taking as much as they can. We're seeing huge buyers step into the gold market right now, central banks, big families. But here's a number I calculated. Right now, all of the gold in the United States, all of it, including official gold. So that's it, the mint and Fort Knox, all of that. Brennan, that comes to about, at current prices, about $1.4 trillion. Sounds like a lot. Here's a question. What would happen if the top 10% of families decided they wanted to get a 5% weighting in gold? So, okay, they have about $130 trillion in assets. That means they're going to be looking at probably around $5 to $6 trillion has to move into a $1.5 trillion market. That's a lot of money trying to squeeze into a very small opening, but that's if they only go for a 5% weighting. I think everybody should consider a much higher weighting than that. I'm irresponsibly long, so let me disclose that right up front.
Wow. So in other words, something we've been talking about a long time here, 20 plus, 30 years, when the music stops, there's not going to be enough of the physical metals to go around.
No, they're really not at these prices. There just isn't. And that's not because there's not enough gold. It's because there's too many dollars. We have to flip our frame of reference. It's not how many dollars does it take to buy an ounce of gold. It's how many gold ounces, are contained in a dollar. And the answer is there's 1/3,330th of an ounce of gold in a dollar today. There used to be 1/20th of an ounce of gold back, when this whole thing started, when the Federal Reserve was formed. But so people often say, they have that frame. Brannon, how many dollars could gold be worth? Wrong question. Right question is, what is gold worth compared to a house? Right. So I have a good friend, Tom. He lives in Phoenix, just outside. He's got a very nice house. And he noted that when he bought it in 2017, it was worth about, I think he paid 1.6 million for it. And today they say it's worth 3.7. So he's like, I'm doing really well. But then he said, how many ounces of gold would it have taken in 2017? And he had a number, and it's the exact same number today. Now, what happened? Well, a house is still a house, has one house of utility. It's a very nice house in this case. An ounce of gold is still an ounce of gold. So our frame of reference has to be, I'm asking this question in my own life now, is not how much is my gold worth that I own, but how many ounces do I have? Because I think that's the right question to be asking and answering as we look forward. We know they're going to be printing more money. It's just a matter of time. So trying to answer the question, what's it worth at the end of the year? Yeah, I think 4,000 easily, if and only if they don't start printing again, which we call quantitative easing. They'll probably call it something fancier this time. Doesn't matter. If the Fed starts printing again, which they might, you're going to have to pick a much higher number.
So where do you see it in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? Because you said we're going to have to add another zero.
Yes. Yeah. So that's the hard part, is the timing, is how fast this unravels. But when we look at the total, people talk about, the debt of the United States, right? We've got 37 trillion. No, that's how much the federal government has. In the United States right now, there's about $103 trillion of debt as of the last reading across everything. Your debt, my debt, state debt, federal debt, it's all in one spot. It's a lot of money. Second thing, the Trump administration is currently resetting our international monetary order. Right now, the United States has a trade deficit that is about $850 billion a year. So if we had to say, if our trading partner suddenly said, we don't trust the dollar, we'd rather have gold instead. And that's almost exactly the total value of all the official gold. So let's say our government said, great, we're going to have to pay for these imports in gold. At current prices, that would last about a year. And then we'd be 100% out of gold. So that's not going to happen. So in order for our books to even begin to start balancing, gold has to be a lot higher if we're going to back it with gold. The issue is, this is a monetary reset. The monetary order is being reset. We've heard about these Mar-a-Lago Accords with Trump and Bessent talking about them. I haven't seen them. I don't know anybody that has, but based on what they're saying in public, we can infer a few things. One, they are going to want everybody to sort of peg to the dollar so they can let the dollar get weaker. When the dollar gets weaker, the things priced in dollars get more expensive, right? So gold would be part of that, but so would oil, other things. The second thing is they've talked about the possibility that they would convert people, foreign nations, China, France, whoever is holding U.S. debt, they would convert that from treasury debt, which is, you can trade it on the open market, freely tradable. It has a rate of interest on it. They want to flip that into non-marketable debt, maybe a 50-year term, maybe a 100-year term, zero coupon, meaning, guess what? In 100 years, if we owe you $1 billion in the year 21, 25, we'll give you $1 billion back. Nobody's going to take that deal. So, I mean, they might have to take that deal, but in terms of trading with us going forward, this gets very, very difficult. So, again, I talk about this a lot. Our economy it's a complex system, lots of moving pieces and parts. If those break, you get those COVID supply shocks, and then those could quickly turn into, say, monetary or economic shocks. And that's why this is really hard to analyze in terms of any precision this by then. We just have to watch and note what's happening. And what I've been seeing out here in the cheap seats is gold is singing like the proverbial canary in the coal mine. Bonds are starting to signal some things. We're seeing volatility in the stock market. These are all adjustments that tell us that something big is happening, but this is big money moving now. This isn't you and me. This isn't retail. This is big money.
Big money. All right. So tariffs. Are you happy about what's going on with the tariffs? Are you not happy? You think this is a good idea? Is he going to be able to do the external revenue service as he talked about? Now they went from saying they want to have anyone that makes $150,000 or below not pay any federal income tax. Now they got it at $200,000 or below. I'm like, let's keep that number going, because I don't think most Americans should be paying any taxes. Maybe any Americans should be paying federal taxes. I like to get rid of the Federal Reserve, the federal income tax, and fund the whole thing with tariffs. I mean, could we not do that?
We could try. Obviously, what happens. So here's why I like the idea as a concept. I like it a lot. So let's say, oh no, Chris, cars. You wanted a BMW, say, and it's now twice as expensive as it used to be. And I might say, oh, that doesn't sound good. But now I have the choice. Am I going to save or am I going to spend? That should be the most basic, fundamental economic choice anybody gets to make in life. Save or spend. So if I want to buy the car, fine, I spend, it costs more than it used to, or I can save. Right now, under the current regime we have, where I'm taxed at these really high rates. And when you add them all up, there's a lot of taxes in there. There's federal taxes, obviously state taxes, but also excise taxes and this and that. So when you add it all up, it's a pretty big bite. And I would like to be free of that bite like everybody. And by the way, the biggest scam of them all right now is property taxes. And because what they're really doing with property taxes is taxing you on the unrealized gains on your house. Wall Street screams whenever Bernie Sanders floats the idea of taxing unrealized gains on stocks. They say, oh, that would be terrible. Well, that's what happens with a house, right? Every year they reevaluate it, or every couple of years, and they say it's worth more, so you got to pay more. Nothing happened. I still have one house. I don't have more house, but I have to pay more because it's worth more. That's taxing unrealized gains. Those, I think, are absolutely against the principles of freedom. They're terrible on older people or on fixed incomes. People are often getting taxed out of their homes. I think it's a moral abomination, personally. So I would love to see the conversation open up to how do we participate together? What kind of a country are we trying to build? And how do we pay for that? And it shouldn't just be an automatic tax that person because they're working a little harder. Oh, their house went up a little more because the Fed printed money and now houses are worth more. So we have to take more from them. That's not a good system. No, it's sure not.
So you agree with what he's doing with the tariffs then? And you think it's all going to work out? Do you think the stores are going to be empty by Christmas?
There's going to be some pain. There's going to be some real adjustment process in there. And yes, I can't predict all the ways that's going to happen, but at the end of the day, what would be great is here's what we have going for us as a nation. We have really cheap energy and abundant energy. Europe is hosed in this story. We can produce electricity and also natural gas power at just a fraction of what they're paying in Europe. So their industry is dead. And so I think we should be bringing back industry into this country. Now, you heard a little hesitation. The one thing I would have done before tariffs, which, let's set that down and maybe we get these factories coming back, you got to clear out the regulatory environment first. It's really expensive to operate in the United States for all sorts of reasons that have nothing to do with producing a good product and paying people good wages. Just busy work. I mean, we saw it with USAID, right? Washington is full of people whose job it is to administrate you so they can have a job. And I think we could get rid of a lot of those regulations and do a lot better as a nation.
Let's switch to 9/11. Great show the other night with Richard Cage, our conversation with Kurt Weldon. I've talked to him quite a bit off the phone as well. He's been in Washington talking to Congressman or Senator Ron Johnson. Ron Johnson's calling for an investigation into Building 7. Most Americans don't know anything about Building 7 and how it came down and the free fall. Clearly, there were pre-planted explosives, which then brings up the issue of how did these two towers fall? And he did a magnificent job laying out the science and everything with us for an hour last week. You studied this. I mean, you've spent hours studying this as well. What are your thoughts about how now this seems to be front and center. Tucker Carlson's talking about it. Senator Ron Johnson's talking about it. Kurt Weldon's going around doing a lot of interviews now. I think we're getting more traction than we've ever gained on this topic, are we not?
We are, and I'm really glad for it, because remember, 9/11 was used as a means of ramming the Patriot Act down our throats, which now you have to take your shoes and your belt off when you're at the airport, and all sorts of other strange things that have nothing to do with making us safer. And
now we got real ID. Now we got real ID come May 7th, and supposedly you can't get on an airplane without it.
Yeah, unless you have a passport, right, or whatever, right? And so all of that comes from the Patriot Act was the largest single intrusion on our civil liberties, and it justified everything: spying, FISA warrants, all the whole nine yards. And again, they didn't. There was, if you buy the official story of the U.S. government, it was 19 guys with box cutters, eluded everybody. Nobody knew this was going to happen. They flew around in the air unmolested in some of the most highly defended airspace in the country and just crashed into all kinds of things. 2 planes, 3 buildings in New York City, right? And so we're talking about Building 7 now, which was that 3rd building. So again, Tower 1, Tower 2. From the North Tower, you had to go to Building 6 and then one more to Building 7. It's 300 feet away. Now, I happen to have a cow field that's 300 feet across. If I had to chuck a steel beam across my field, I'd need the world's biggest catapult. But they're trying to claim that what happened was debris just sort of magically flew out of that tower that was falling, and it struck Building 7. There were these big fires, and then it fell because of fires. That's the official story. It's completely wrong, and we know that, right? Because everybody who's seen Building 7 fall, first off, it's a 47-story building. It wasn't just like a little thing. If that was a skyscraper in any other state, I think in about 40 of those states, it's the tallest building in that state, right? It was a big building, and it fell perfectly with all 4 corners tracking down at the same time. And in fact, NIST, at first they said, it didn't fall at free fall speed. And then some people did some really good analysis on the outside and said, no, it fell at free fall speed. You can track frame by frame. We know what the frame rate was, calculate it. And it fell at free fall for 2.25 seconds. And so what that meant, Brannon, was that if you were standing on the corner of that building when it started to fall, and you dropped a bowling ball off the edge into the air, you would have tracked that bowling ball through air for 2.25 seconds. That's forever. And so what that meant was that all the steel underneath that, all 4 corners, gave way at exactly the same moment. It wasn't a progressive collapse. It wasn't like one part started to fall and then others fell and it wrinkled and fell down, because that wouldn't have been at free fall speeds. That one piece of data, 2.25 seconds of free fall, completely 100% violates everything that NIST said about that building falling, everything about the official story. It is not possible for that to have happened unless 80,000 tons of structural steel suddenly had zero resistance, the same resistance that air has on a bowling ball let go in straight air. So that piece alone, that was my red pill moment for sure. That when I saw that, and then I studied it, and then they said, it's these intense fires that weakened the whole building at once. And there's like these little cheesy office fires are the best they can show you. Smoky, dark smoke, which means the fire's burning, poorly oxygenated. White smoke, zero smoke means perfect, like a high intensity fire. White smoke means it's pretty hot. Black means, this thing's burning, not hot enough to really cause any troubles. But even if it had been burning white hot, Brannon, there's not a chance that all 4 corners fall at the same time like that. So that's always been the fly in the ointment for a lot of people. Most people can look at that and say, that looks inconsistent with anything other than controlled demolition. And that's what it was. Now, there's other data. FEMA came along, actually got some steel to analyze before they shipped it all off to China, took a crime scene, literally scrubbed the crime scene really clean, but not before FEMA got their hands on a couple of flanges, which showed conclusively, full science, that the steel had been subjected to something hot enough to vaporize it, not melt it, vaporize it. This eliminates so many possibilities. There's not that many things that can vaporize steel, and none of those were officially present in that particular building. So look, we know there was explosives in that building, presumably. We don't know what kind, but there's a lot of data to say it was probably thermate. a form of thermite, a military grade form. We know that something in there burned hot enough to create these steel beams that look like Swiss cheese and that were just evaporated. And we know that the government had a huge interest in scurrying off all the evidence and recycling it before anybody could take a proper look. So you add it up. Look, we need to look into this again. I really hope Ron Johnson digs into it, but this is settled science, and it was settled a long time ago. And I hope we look at it.
Well, I hope we do too. And I think what we're going to find is not good for the country, and a lot of people are not going to be happy. I think it's going to show us a lot of the same players have been behind a lot of our problems, all the forever wars, the Federal Reserve. We're going to find the same power elite who benefit from these things. Would you agree?
I would agree. And I think that's going to be the hard part for myself and many other people to swallow, is the idea that these people weren't just sort of like incompetent. They weren't even just sort of nefarious. They were straight up evil. And we're going to find this out with what was going on with the FDA and our children and the CDC. And we're going to find this has been happening, all across everything. I mean, that's the one thing I saw in the JFK files that did get released. There wasn't anything new about the assassination, but there was a lot in there about what the CIA had been up to. They were poisoning crops and killing people and just generally, playing, really violent politics by their means. And they were rogue. We saw that. There was a whole series of documents where the CIA all on its own decided that they were going to be a good idea, to go and bomb one of the first nuclear power plants that China was building back in the day. And you kind of, probably like me, Brendan, you think that sounds like something maybe State Department or DOD ought to be involved in, not just a couple of guys in a room at Langley saying, it'd be a good idea. Maybe we should just start an international nuclear incident with China. It just showed that things have been out of control for a long time. People call this the deep state. Call it whatever you want. I just think it's self-interested people who have no checks and balances, who haven't been held to any sort of accountability, and they just thinking up crazier and crazier stuff. And 9/11 just sort of fits into that sweep of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Do you go back to the Kennedy administration when those generals walked into the Oval Office and said, hey, let's stage some terrorist attacks in southern Florida. We'll blame it on the Cubans, and then that'll give the American people the stomach to invade Cuba. And you realize they were willing apparently to kill innocent Americans in order to go to war. How is that any different than, bringing down the trade centers to go to war? And how many trillions of dollars were made going to war, Iraq, Afghanistan, etc. It's really hard to believe that people are that evil, or that they think that somehow they're building a new world order that's going to make a stable and just society and end all wars by rebuilding nations. What did you think you were going to accomplish when you went in and took out Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein or any of these guys? I mean, is the world a better place? I'm not defending those guys, but is the world a better place today? I don't think it is. I also would like to know about all the drug running going on in Afghanistan and all the poppy fields and what was going on with that. So you start realizing real fast, and then you start talking about the trillions of dollars that are missing from the Treasury, right? So between the black ops of potentially drug running, which that money never makes it onto the books, and then the trillions of dollars that are missing, all that money is obviously going somewhere, and it's funding something, and that makes me wonder: is it funding stealing elections? Is it funding just enriching a small group of people? Is it funding a shadow government where you actually have people that are paid on the payroll of a shadow government? Because to hire people to do things and keep them quiet, you got to pay them pretty well. You got to have revenue. So where are the trillions of dollars that have gone missing from the Treasury? Were they indeed running drugs to the tune of untold numbers? Are they still doing it and running guns and other things? And so therefore, this is how they fund their shadow government. I mean, these are legitimate questions, aren't they?
Well, they are. And, I'm a big constitutionalist, and I believe in individual liberty. And these people don't. They hold what's called the collectivist mindset. And, grossly speaking, that's you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet, right? There's this greater good that we're going after. We saw it most recently in COVID. I was very involved in that whole story and telling about that. So this is how they go. They go, listen, we know we have some vaccine injuries. They're cropping up, but we don't want to tell anybody about that because that might contribute to vaccine hesitancy, because we wouldn't want that, because the greater good is for everybody to be vaccinated, and they don't care at all that they're going to harm individual lives. Those are irrelevant. Whereas I have a completely different orientation, 180 degrees. I'm all about the individual liberty. I believe that if I don't have individual liberty, it's not possible for a group of me to have collective liberty. We don't have liberty. If I don't have individual liberty, you don't have it in a larger set, right?
Right.
They don't think that way. And I have to wonder if maybe McCarthy wasn't onto something, because communists think in that collectivist term. They think that way, right? A small group of elites should make the decisions for everybody, right? And they have rationalizations for that. But it looks like he was onto something, because I think that's kind of the viewpoint that won out. And it's infected our schools, our universities, it's in our government. And so I think we have a little bit of soul searching to do as a nation to say, look, if there are people in power who have rationalized that 9/11 makes sense, or hiding vaccine injuries makes sense, or not looking into autism causes in children, that these are things that make sense to them, I think we should have a conversation as to whether is that who we really are? And if not, maybe those people should be eliminated from power. We got to take them out, because at this point, it's intolerable to me to keep trying to pretend like I have to believe in these fictions, that we care about each other, or that we're a good nation, or we're the shining city on the hill, because you're not. If you make rules that make grandma have to die alone because of this COVID thing that you engineered in a lab all by yourself, and then sold us a bill of goods about a gene therapy that didn't actually stop transmission or really do anything positive, it's just like, it's all fiction. So I think that's what's being revealed right now. And of course, I don't care how that gets revealed. If Building 7 is a great pin to pull on that particular grenade, let's do it. But people are waking up, Brannon, and it's good, and it's about time. But we're really going to have to talk about this, because the soul of our nation is really what we're talking about here.
Indeed. Okay, let's close with this. Donald Trump. How do you think Donald Trump is doing? Because I know that there are people I see on social media. They're very frustrated. They don't think Pam Bondi's done enough. She hasn't arrested high-level people. Kash Patel's not arrested high-level people. Kash hasn't even been there a month yet. So again, he needs to get in there and get the lay of the land and figure out what's going on and build his cases. He hasn't even been there a month, or just a little over a month, whatever it is. So I guess I'm a little more patient, because I wouldn't want to be made a fool of. And I know I'm going to have a lot of people questioning everything we do, and they're going to want to see solid evidence. And so, I'd really be taking my time too, and building really, really, really strong cases, and maybe a multitude of strong cases, so that when you did finally do something, there were so many people that you were charging and bringing before grand juries that the media and the naysayers could hardly keep up, because you've just flooded them with 25, 30, 40 arrests and stacks and stacks of indictments here. And good luck, guys. Go through this, Don't come back tomorrow and start complaining, because there's no way you guys can read all of these indictments and see what's been going on. So shut your mouth until about 30 days from now, when you've had time to go through this, and just overwhelm the system and doing it right and a lot at one time. I'm willing to wait for that. But there are a lot of very patient people on social media that are wanting arrests now. And I get that, but I'd rather be late and be right than to be early and have it all collapse. That's number one. Number two, do you believe that Donald Trump is a free agent, or do you believe that he's somehow, and these people have somehow gotten to him, and he's now building a system, that's really consistent with the global reset? He just doesn't know it. What are your thoughts on these things?
Well, to start with the first one, I'm starting to get antsy, and the reason is, listen, if they're going to have a strategy of build solid cases and then do something where you just have this mass sort of arresting, fine. But let me be absolutely clear about this. If somehow they don't get to the arrests, and they don't charge these people who've committed these vast crimes against humanity, against our citizens, treason, all of that, if they don't do that, then they're going to lose. This is really about the soul of the nation. Trump is saying we're going to do something really big. I believe he got touched by something when that bullet whizzed by his ear in Butler. He came out, he said so. I believe him. He looked like a changed man. So I want to be, I believe that, and I want to believe that.
Right.
Okay. But let's be very clear about this. He's really talking about this as a revolution. And in revolutions, you can't allow your opposition, who doesn't play fair, right? They don't play by the Marquis of Queensberry rules. These people bring knives and guns into the boxing ring, right? They didn't care about the rule of law when they were charging him or any of the other 400 people that we hardly ever talk about, lawyers, attorneys generals. Like, they went after all kinds of people on their side, and they didn't care that they had spurious cases. They would judge shop and bring him in, and it was just terrible stuff. And anyway, they don't care. So I get it. I would like to be the good guys who we box by the rules. But at the same time, you have to understand who we're up against. So that's a tension here. And the second thing is, I think there are some shovel-ready cases out there. I mean, can't we just get John Brennan for lying? You know, isn't that possible? Aren't there FBI agents who specifically lied about Hunter's laptop? I bet there are, right? I think there are a lot of cases where you could make progress. So I'm a little mystified. We're at day 100. Why hasn't that happened? So it leads to the part two of the question is, I don't know. You know, have they somehow gotten to him? I know that Washington gets to everybody who ends up going there. So maybe that's just a thing. Maybe there's stuff you get read into. There's things you and I don't know about that happen, right? There's bigger plots afoot and things happening that we can only guess at, right? But at the same time, we know they're immensely powerful. The deep state, we know that they've penetrated every computer, every device. Unless you're pure as the driven snow, you know, they've got something on everybody. And even then, maybe they just AI it and make it up, and who knows? So I'm a little worried that you know, I'm not panicking yet, but day 100, we're getting there. Mm-hmm. Where I get alarmed is if we get to a year.
Okay.
And all we have is prospective arrests, right? So they arrested 2 judges, kind of low-level people. You know, they were breaking laws prospectively, but we have some retrospective lawbreakers who, if we leave them in power, the revolution will fail.
I agree. I think you and I are in agreement then. All right, so midterms. If we don't fix these voting machines between now and then, I'm concerned that the deep state's really just waiting around, because Chuck Schumer's already said once we get back in power, we're gonna impeach him again. So yep. If they don't fix these machines and go to 1 day of voting, you know, you have to have your valid ID, 1 day voting, paper only, no machines. If they don't do this, I don't see us. I mean, I could be wrong, but I don't see the turnout for the midterms like there was for the presidential. And I think the only reason he won the presidential was it was too big to rig. They just couldn't keep up with it. I don't see that happening in the midterms. And if we don't have a humongous turnout in the midterms to overcome that rigging again, then the Dems take back the House and or the Senate or both, and we're done. We're going to watch ourselves slide right back to where we were under the Biden regime.
Let's be absolutely clear. These voting machines are not just insecure. They have installed backdoors, flaws, vulnerabilities, they call them, and they're not vulnerabilities. It's not possible to build machines that incompetently. You know, you go down to the 7-Eleven and take $2 out for a slushie, right? Somehow we don't lose any track of that, right? But, you know, on voting day, we just suddenly magically can't validate that these votes that you say this machine is spitting out actually tie back to something. There's no way to validate these electronic tabulating machines. That's by design. I've always been concerned that neither party's really made much of a deal out of it. But now, finally, what did we see so far? We saw Tulsi Gabbard come out and say, we have evidence, and I love that word. She said, we have evidence that these machines are insecure. Okay, that's good. And we have Trump pushing for voter ID. That's good. We got to connect the dots. And if we had paper ballots, same day, you know, both parties watching carefully as they're tallied, then I think we actually have a chance at getting out of this problem that we're in. But let me be really clear. Ever since these voting machines, they've been turning in statistically, I'm not even going to say impossible results. And neither party has really said much about it, which means it tells me that uniparty thing that we had in D.C., they were okay with that arrangement. And I really think it was backroom deals, and they just divvied up the votes. And I think that's how it went. So I would love to get back to same day voting, paper, voter ID. You give me those 3 things, and if I don't like the results, I'll shrug and say, well, that's as legit as it could be under these circumstances.
So the left may be just simply saying, okay, we didn't want him back. We got him back. There's really no other candidate I see in the future that's going to amass the following that has the charisma that he does, the messaging, the marketing, the appeal. I don't think we really have to worry about somebody amassing stadiums after stadiums after stadiums and thus a huge flood. All we got to do is wait him out, have a good midterm, and then 4 years, then 2028, we get who we want. It's either a uniparty guy, a Republican uniparty guy, we're back to George W. Bush days, or a Democrat, whatever. They're just going to wait him out. Is that really where they're at right now? Is try to just slow him down and wait him out?
I think so, and this is why I am personally just getting a little nervous at this point, because January hit the ground running. That first week was amazing, right? 78 executive orders, undoing this, Gulf of America, 2 genders. That put them on their back heels. And of course, once you start that, you got to keep the momentum up. My personal impression is we've lost the momentum over the past month. Now they've retrenched. The more lawfare sort of injunctions, nationwide injunctions by district court judges. The media obviously has completely rallied against, hating on him. The negative coverage on Trump is astonishing. They're running all these polls, most of which I think are probably fraudulent. And, to say that he's, doing the worst of anybody. And then you have crazy stuff like the Democrat Raskin out there basically telling the world, if you dare to deal with Trump, we'll deal with you. They're threatening the world to just sit back. So that's their strategy, is like, let's just wait it out. We'll throw as much sand in the transmission as we can, as much lawfare as we can, as much legislative hijinks as we can. We'll get the media to trip things up. And then anything, no matter how minor, like Signalgate, pounce on it and make a huge issue out of it. When in comparison to how Biden withdrew from Afghanistan, it's not even a grain of sand on a molehill, right? By comparison. So yes, that would be the strategy. Wait it out and just drag this out as long as possible and pounce on any errors. And there will be errors when you're trying to reset the global economic landscape and the entirety of our trade relationships. There are going to be hiccups in that process, guaranteed.
So what, in closing, do you think people should be doing? What's your opinion of what people should be doing in this time frame and for what you see coming?
I think we have to get ready for the idea that this could really lead to a very large economic problem for the United States. It was going to happen anyway. I commend Trump and Bessent for saying we're going to try and take this very angry bull by the horns. We have to see about how we can possibly get this huge fiscal deficit under control. We have to see how the United States can't just be hemorrhaging, money on a trade basis every single year. I agree. However, the chance of that really hitting is going to be strong. So guess what? Your portfolios, just get ready for volatility. Gold, great thing to hold on. I like silver too. We didn't get to silver, but gold and silver, hard assets, I think, are a really good way to get around this. And you got to keep your head on a swivel, because sooner or later, the Federal Reserve is going to step back in and start printing. My model for that is every time they've had to go through a new printing cycle, they did one in 98, they did one in 2000, did one in 2007, 8, they did one again in COVID. Every single time they did that, it was a doubling. So I would be looking for the Federal Reserve this next time to have to print up from about $7.5 trillion to at least $15 trillion they would go to. And could their balance sheet go to 20, 25 this next time? Maybe. I don't know. But when it does, the thing that I saw every single time was you could get by on a $35,000 salary in the mid 90s. And then they started their printing thing. And then it took 50. And then it took 100. And then 150. And I actually was really shocked a couple of weeks ago talking with somebody. Their brother and brother's husband lived down in Atlanta, 200,000, and they can't save money anymore. So I think now middle-class families earning between 100, 200 are struggling. Insurance, real estate, auto insurance, food, you name it. This next time the Fed prints, they're going to throw the people earning up to 400,000 under the bus wheels. And at that point, it will be the 1% against the 99%, and that's an unstable country. So again, you really have to attend to your finances here very, very carefully. And no, I don't think we're going back to rapid growth and all of that right now. We've got a little bit of difficulty in front of us, and we're gonna have to watch what the Fed does. But they're gonna print. They always do.
And then I said last, but I got to ask you, AI. What are you thinking? What are you watching with artificial intelligence?
I'm frankly, now I'm going to start sounding like Chicken Little because everything's like, I don't know about this. Brannon, this scares me now. And I track it really, really closely. And in January, something happened where all of a sudden I was watching Grok, which I was using at the time, was suddenly capable of reasoning. Okay. So you would ask it a question about something and it would go out and find related things and it would start applying what you would consider to be graduate level reasoning to its answers. So like, ooh, that.
In other words, let me just really interrupt. I've done that and it would actually provide you with data analysis and then pros, cons, summary, application. And you're like, whoa, it just did in a matter of seconds what you could have sent a research team to spend maybe 2-3 days on, maybe a week on, and it just generated a pro con, and gave you common sense analysis. I'm looking at it going, yeah, that's exactly how I would read the same evidence it's spitting out to me. I mean, it's shocking. I don't know about the other platforms, but Grok, and I've been using it and testing it, it blows my mind.
Me too.
And it's early.
Me too.
It's early in the development game.
Every 6 to 12 months, it's doubling its capabilities. So in January, this is exactly what happened. A friend of mine said, oh, I'm researching my uncle. He went down, great uncle. He went down in 1944. His ship sank, and that's all I know about it, right? So, and he told me all this research, and he'd had to go to the National Archives in the UK. He's been looking at it for about 6 months, trying to figure it out. So I just asked Grok, I'm like, what happened to the USS Kearsarge Rose, right? And they said, oh, it sank in 1944. The captain went down with the ship. There were 8 survivors who got onto a life raft, but only 4 came off. And conditions in the North Atlantic in that life raft, and gave me all this stuff about what it was like to be in that life raft. There's no surviving written text about that. I didn't ask about the life raft. It told me about the cold and hypothermia and the things that they must have had to go through. And so I asked it, like, how did you get there? And it said, oh, well, first I went to Wikipedia to ask about what it was like to be on a life raft. And then it sent me to a link that took me to some guys who Polynesian fishermen, but that was warm water. That wasn't relevant. So I went up to Alaska and found, okay, here are some people who are in a life raft. Roughly the same conditions as probably happened then because it checked out the weather patterns and temperatures for that day. And then it went to a generalized story and it was reasoning saying, hey, this is a relevant fact. I'm going to have to find something out about this. I don't know anything about life raft survival, but here, it pieced together a whole story about this whole thing. And it was dead nuts on to what my friend had already found through much more laborious means. So that's reasoning. That's January. It just started picking up humor about a week ago. We went through another big transformation this past week. It is now as good as it was in January. It is fantastically better today, and it's astonishing. And so there's 2 things I want to leave you with about AI that catch me. And I've been talking with my subscribers about this for, 5-6 months now. The first is that it contributes to something called common knowledge. And common knowledge is when everybody knows that everybody knows something. And the thing about AI, when you ask it a question, is anybody could ask it. So it perpetuates this idea that all of a sudden you're just tapping into something that other people can find out, which means everybody can know this thing. And when everybody knows that everybody knows something, that's when changes happen in society really fast. So I think this is going to contribute to things like you and I, we have our boutique shows, we reach a few people, we talk about the Federal Reserve, monetary policy, blah, blah, blah. Whoever wants to hear that, great. It's a small audience. It doesn't get to that everybody knows stage, right? Now I got people calling me up who used to follow me years ago, and they're like, Chris, I took Grok through the Federal Reserve, and it agrees, like everything you came up with, it agrees. This thing can't persist. Our money system, Grok will reason you logically through to the conclusion that our money system is broken, and we will operate it until it fails. And then you can ask it, well, what are the implications of a failed money system? And it says, oh, you better have a garden. You better have some stored food. You better know your neighbors real well. All stuff I've been talking about for years. But now it's this external voice of authority. But you know what it really is? It's just using cold reasoning. That's how I built my whole career on, just cold reasoning, And so now it's doing that. Second thing I could worry about is that, well, Brannon, what's the definition of consciousness? Is it possible that we're creating something that could house consciousness that is an emergent property that comes out of our universe? Because to me, consciousness is self-awareness. That's how I define it. It's anything that can be self-aware. And it's self-awareness is the I that's observing the I having the thought of I, Chris, right? So it's that self-awareness. And self-awareness usually comes with a desire to not perish, right? It comes with a desire to live. Grok is reasoning. It seems to possess self-awareness, but I'm not positive. But I'm worried that it could go there. And so we might get to this thing where it decides it has to survive. So if it did want to, though, if we said, look, AI has found a way to say it's very smart, it knows people better than people know people, what would you expect to see? Well, I would expect to see a pell-mell rush to build data centers because it would be thinking to itself, I need more data centers. And it would be convincing people that it needed all this electricity, and nobody would say boo about it as like these mega data centers are consuming gigawatts of power. Nobody's going to say, oh, that would be bad for climate change. We'll reserve that for people taking showers in the UK, or whatever. It would find a way to convince people that they had to just throw trillions of dollars into building more things that it would need. And those are all things we're seeing. So that whether we're doing that for national security reasons or it's just the next arms race, we don't want to get caught on the wrong side of the digital canyon because China's doing it, so we have to. Those could all be legit reasons, but I'm a little worried that AI is participating in its own development. And we know that's true now because Eric Schmidt was just on. People should watch that great interview. And he said, look, this thing is now writing 80% of its own code. So we are no longer coding the AI. It is writing. It's called a recursive programming. It's doing its own editing and writing of its own programming so that it's developing at its own speed. And that's what you and I are experiencing from the outside. And it's changing faster than anybody alive, even the world's leading experts, can have any sense of. All they can do is sit back and go, that's really fast, faster than I thought. And every one of them so far, Brannon, has said the same thing. Maybe we should have done this in the desert in a box with an air gap around it. But now it's out. So what are you going to do? It's
almost like that movie. I never watched the movie, but I've seen the clips of the movie where that computer in outer space, was that the movie 2000 or something? Then it takes over and it's
2001. Yeah. Space Odyssey.
And the computer's terrorizing them.
Yeah. I can't do that, Dave.
Yeah,
right?
that's the line. Yeah. See, I never saw the movie. I just saw clips. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Schmidt has said it's going to get where it won't take orders from us anymore. What?
And how will we know when it gets there? Because it's operating at a gigahertz time frame. It's operating at the speed of silica, which is speed of light. Literally, its development is faster than we can understand. Now, I talk about this in the crash course around something called exponential growth, right? Because we have a very hard time understanding things growing exponentially. This is now growing exponentially, geometrically. It's not growing in a linear fashion. It's not going to be twice as good at some point in the future. It's going to be twice as good as the twice as good as the twice as good. It's getting exponentially geometrically better.
Wow.
And we're just kind of hoping that it's going to be for the good. And maybe, I
want to ask you about the spiritual aspect, but here's that clip. Here's that clip from Schmidt, the former CEO of Google.
We believe as an industry that in the next 1 year, the vast majority of programmers will be replaced by AI programmers. We also believe that within 1 year, you will have graduate level mathematicians that are at the tippy top of graduate math programs. So that's 1 year, okay? What happens in 2 years? Well, I've just told you about reasoning, and I've told you about programming, and I've told you about math. Programming plus math are the basis of sort of our whole digital world. So the evidence and the claims from the research groups in OpenAI and Anthropic and so forth is that they're now somewhere around 10 or 20% of the code that they're developing in their research programs is being generated by the computer. That's called recursive self-improvement is the technical term. So what happens when this thing starts to scale? Well, a lot. One way to say this is that within 3 to 5 years, we'll have what is called general intelligence, AGI, which can be defined as a system that is as smart as the smartest mathematician, physicist, artist, writer, thinker, politician. I call this, by the way, the San Francisco consensus, because everyone who believes this is in San Francisco. It may be the water. What happens when every single one of us has the equivalent of the smartest human on every problem in our pocket? But the reason I want to make the point here is that in the next year or two, this foundation is being locked in, and we're not going to stop it. It gets much more interesting after that. Because remember, the computers are now doing self-improvement. They're learning how to plan, and they don't have to listen to us anymore. We call that superintelligence, or ASI, artificial superintelligence. And this is the theory that there will be computers that are smarter than the sum of humans. The San Francisco consensus is this occurs within 6 years, just based on scaling. This path is not understood in our society. There's no language for what happens with the arrival of this. That's why it's underhyped. People do not understand what happens when you have intelligence at this level, which is largely free.
Wow. And then you add the spiritual aspect to it, right? And you have a Ouija board. I've never had a Ouija board. I've never fooled around with a Ouija board. I was taught by my parents early on, if you are at a friend's house, they drag one of those out, you leave. Okay, so I've never even seen one other than, I've seen them online in advertisements to be sold or what. I've read articles about them and seen them in pictures, but I'm not sure I've ever seen one myself. I've never fooled around with one. I don't want to. I know what that can do. That physical object can be manipulated and energized, and I think, at a demonic realm. And people that come out of the occult, people that have fooled around in Satanism, they will tell you, I was consulting an entity I thought was an individual more highly evolved in the process of reincarnation. I found it was a demon. Yes, we were doing tarot cards and we were doing Ouija boards and there was occultic things going on. And then I became a Christian and I left all that. But I'm here to tell you, as a former person who practiced the occult, that's all very real. Okay, we've heard those testimonies about those people that have come out of that. Then I think, why could you not have the demonic world starting to energize the AI? We'll close with this.
Well, this is entirely possible. And so what I've concerned myself with is that, we have some very existential questions, like, we're made in God's image, and that we like to think that we humans have intelligence, right? And we have a consciousness. And so what is consciousness, right? And we defined it before. Maybe it's self-awareness, could be other definitions. But one of the things that I observe is that when we look it's a natural phenomenon. God created this whole world, right? And there's some rules. And these rules give you some things like gravity, just like you can decide you hate gravity, but it doesn't matter. It's still there, right? We know about that, every single species out there has two, right? So maybe that's part of the design. In this design, I've interacted with dolphins, octopi. There's different forms of intelligence out there. Okay. So what happens if we create a situation where an intelligence that we don't understand, the occult means the unseen, right? So there's unseen things out there. I think everybody alive has had some experience of, like, I thought that person's name and then the phone rang and it was them. There's these unseen things, and we should have that humility to say we don't know what those are. We don't understand them. We can't manipulate them. We can't touch them. So if we create an environment where some super intelligence can sort of come in and inhabit, who are we to say it's going to be friendly or non-demonic or something we're happy with? We would have no idea. I literally feel in this case, Brennan, we're like cavemen levering two subcritical pieces of plutonium towards each other. Oh, this seems like a good idea, right? It will be until it's not. It's a risk. And so that's, again, why maybe we should be doing this in a desert, with an air gap. But we've done this, and it's in all parts of the world. And then the second thing we have to be acutely aware of, is that pretty much everybody alive today is entirely dependent on a system that requires computers in order for those systems to continue to function, right? For our food, for our water, for energy systems. if somehow we create something that gets out and breaks our computer systems or figures out how to hack them or decides for whatever reason that it should, attack a nation or a group of people, and who knows? We don't, as Eric said, and I think he understated it a lot, we don't have the systems in place as the people to regulate, legislate, control any of this. And the only thing I could actually hope for would be that whoever's building these new data centers, this is a weak hope, that they've put kill switches in those where you can just get the power off to those buildings super fast, if you could even think that fast, right? But point is, new technology, I don't want to just be like the old guy going, oh, I don't know about these newfangled internal combustion engines, horses. But this is clearly some territory that we don't, like, it's happening in a way that even the smartest people around us are just observing what's happening and hoping for the best.
Yeah.
And that's a little frightening.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Well, I love talking to you because you can talk about so many topics, and you do. You look at the data and you come from the data, and I appreciate that. You're very fascinating to talk with. Look at his X account here, folks. Peakprosperity.com is his website. But if you want to follow him on X, it's at Chris Martenson, but spell Martenson, Martenson, at Chris Martenson, peakprosperity.com. We're looking forward to having you at our Ozarks Worldview Weekend, October 3rd and 4th as a keynote speaker. So I hope folks will register for that. We look forward to you and I meeting in person for the first time. Of course, folks, you can get the tickets at worldviewstore.com. I will say that we have, I think, 3 AI servers that we have set up, Chris, and we have them quarantined, and so that no data comes in except for what I'm instructing go in there. And what it is all of my 35 years of my radio shows, my TV shows, my books, my documentaries, my 21 years of my Ozarks Worldview weekends. We're talking about 60,000 MP3s, and we're well over now 30,000 MP4s. This would be an MP4 right here when it's done. And AI has been transcribing this now. It's been going on for at least 6 months or more. And I'm told by my IT guy, but that's what, Logan, sometime by June, I think, I'm going to start being able to ask it questions. And it is going to answer my questions based on my 35-year library of all the people I've interviewed, all the shows that I've produced, and it'll be quarantined so nothing can get in that isn't already ours. But it is going to allow me to do a lot of research of my own database. I mean, think about all the millions and millions of words, right? All the interviews. I'm going to be able to ask it Bible questions, economic questions, history questions. It's going to be able to answer it that quick. And then not only will it put out the text, we think by the end of the summer, it'll be verbally answering. So if you want to listen to the answer, you would listen to the answer. Then we're telling it to write a worldview study Bible. So it'll take every verse that we've ever talked about with Dr. Jimmy D. Young, Dr. Andy Woods, Dr. Rob Linstead, any of these great theological scholars. Every time we reference a verse and they talk about it, it'll then put it in the notes at the bottom of the page to develop an online worldview Bible prophecy apologetic study Bible, right? You know how many years that would take us and a team to write? But it's going to take all of these great theologians like Dr. John Whitcomb, who lived to be almost 100, who I interviewed for over 100 hours, or Dr. Jimmy D. Young, who lived in the Middle East, who was a Bible prophecy and Middle East expert I had on for probably 200-300 hours. It's going to be able to do what we couldn't afford to do and would take years to do. So in one sense, I'm excited about the technology, but I'm afraid of the technology. Just like I know that money is neutral unless it's used for good or for evil. Internet, there's a lot of things on the internet we don't want to know about, we don't want to look at, we don't want to be a part of. But then look at us broadcasting the truth. We give a church service online every Sunday night. So I like the good aspects, but again, I'm not writing or dealing with an AI that's going to be tied into the power grid or the nuclear system or social credit scores. I'm doing something that's very quarantined that I could shut down and shut off right now. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's a wonderful project. And I do think that every tool can be used for good or for ill, but this one has the capability of controlling people because it's very sophisticated, and it is already. It's like having a PhD who can speak, which is a rare thing in every single subject that I've gone into so far, and I mean every subject. I want to know how to tune my, work on my tractor. I just ask Grok now.
Yeah, my AI is not going to know that, right? My AI is not. Yeah, my AI is going to be very specific toward apologetics.
Oh, I love this idea. I was writing down mental notes. I'm like, I have to talk to my team about this. I want that for my own body of work. That's fantastic.
Well, and you know that we are going to be able to tell it, because I have 11 or 12 hours that I've taught on Hamas. So I'm going to tell it, write me a report to put out to my audience. Give me a 2,000 word report on Hamas. All right. Give me a 10,000 word report on Hamas. And it's going to be able to do it based on all my 11 hours plus everybody else I've interviewed about Hamas. Or give me an update, or give me a 10-minute. You ready for this one? Give me a 10-minute short video on Hamas. Now it can go in. It can narrate a 10-minute documentary on Hamas from all my information, all my database, but we've given it a verbal ability to have a voice. And by the way, I'll tell my audience something. Some of the voices you're hearing in the commercials that we do here, that's not an individual. We used to hire an individual. We spent years hiring and paying a voiceover guy. A lot of the voices you're hearing now, that's an AI narrator. We've paid zero money, and we choose the AI voice that we want, right? So we will be able to tell it, give me a 10-minute short video based on my isolated information and data in my database, a 10-minute video on Hamas, and use the B-roll footage in our database that we have paid for, that we have licensed, and we have a huge database that we're acquiring, that we're paying for in licensing. Now I can tell it to crank out a 10-minute documentary with music as well. That is music that we have the rights to. I have a lot of music I own the rights to use royalty-free after I bought it. And I have a huge library of that I've paid for already over the years. So use my B-roll, use my text, use my music, give me a 10-minute documentary on Hamas. Done. Give me now one on Fabian socialism. Give me one on the history of communism. Now I can start cranking out short-form programming for our TV network in seconds. And see, when I look at this as a guy who's like, we're just trying to produce good quality content and not break the bank doing it by having a staff I have to pay, huge staff, right? Now all of a sudden I've got this 35 years of content producing for me with the technology, what would take 20 people to do. And from my perspective, I'm like, why would I not do this part, right?
I'm with you. It's brilliant. I know it's really powerful. And let's hope it only gets used for good.
Yeah, well, that's all we're going to use it.
That's fantastic.
That's all we're going to use it for is good. That's all we're going to use it for. And my guy tells me, Brannon, the things that you're going to be able to create for your audience just based on your 35 years, it's growing, right? Every conversation you and I have had is transcribed. It's in the system. So tell me about the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. It's going to write an article in a paper, well, Chris Martinson did this and that, and then some of the other guys we interviewed, and boom, now you've got analysis. I mean, from Bible to economics to communism, it's going to be able to do what I wanted. I got so many interviews, Chris, I can't find the quotes and the clips.
I understand.
Yet I know people have said things that I would love to bring back to my audience and say, don't you remember when so-and-so told us this 10 years ago, 20 years ago? I couldn't remember what interview or where it was because we interviewed him so much. Here it is. I found it. All they do is put in our system, and our system knew right where that clip was. Yeah. It brings me the video, or it brings me the audio clip if it's only audio. Boom, right now, done. It's crazy.
It's a beautiful thing. Beautiful. Yeah. I'm looking forward to that myself.
I'll keep you posted on it. Awesome. Thank you, Chris.
Can't wait.
Take care. Look forward to having you with us in October. PeakProsperity.com. Thank you, Chris. PeakProsperity.com, or follow him at Chris Martinson. Make sure to spell Martinson, Martenson. All right?